The bitter winter wind cut through Sophia Morgan's tattered traveling cloak as she awkwardly descended from the snow-dusted stagecoach onto the wooden platform of Pinecrest Valley, Montana. The empty sleeves of her dress were neatly pinned against, her shoulders fluttering slightly in the mountain breeze. The absence of both arms, lost to a terrible factory accident years ago, had been her cross to bear since she was 16, but today the weight of her difference felt crushing as curious. Eyes turned toward the lone woman passenger with expressions ranging from pity to undisguised shock. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sophia held her head high despite the stares, using the practiced movements of her shoulders and body to maintain her balance as she surveyed the rugged mining town that was to be her new home. The journey from her hometown of Millfield, Pennsylvania had been arduous, each bump and jolt of the stagecoach painful reminder of how dependent she was on the kindness of strangers for the simplest tasks. But determination burned brighter than shame in her heart as she scanned the crowd for the face of Jackson Reed, the man whose letters had promised understanding and partnership in this remote corner of the Montana Territory. Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's video will be even more inspiring. Jackson's final letter had been specific. He would meet every coach that arrived in Pinecrest Valley until she came. Yet as minutes passed and other passengers reunited with waiting family members, Sophia remained alone on the platform, her heart sinking with each passing moment. The station master, a grizzled man with a salt and pepper beard, approached her with a look she had seen countless times before, that uncomfortable mixture of pity and awkwardness that preceded either unwanted help or cruel dismissal. "Miss, you seem to be waiting for someone. Can I be of assistance?" His eyes flickered briefly to her pinned sleeves before settling on her face. Sophia straightened her shoulders, refusing to show weakness. "Yes, I'm looking for Mr. Jackson Reed. He operates a homestead near here and arranged to meet me today." The station master's weathered face fell, and Sophia's heart plummeted before he even spoke. "Miss, I'm mighty sorry to tell you this, but Jackson Reed was caught in a rock slide while clearing a new trail to his property about 2 weeks back. Doc Emmett did everything possible, but his injuries were too severe. The world seemed to tilt beneath Sophia's feet, but years of adapting to life without arms had taught her to maintain her balance in the most precarious situations. "I see," she managed, her voice barely audible over the bustle of the station. "If I may ask, what was your business with Reed?" The station master inquired, though the gentle tone suggested he already suspected. "We were to be married," Sophia replied, the words feeling hollow now. "We had been corresponding for 6 months. He knew about my condition. He said it didn't matter to him." The station master nodded solemnly. "That sounds like Jackson. He was a good man, unusual in his thinking, but respected hereabouts. Folks said he was expecting someone special." He paused, seemingly weighing his next words carefully. "Do you have family back east, or means to return?" The questions pierced Sophia like physical blows. Her family had disowned her after the accident, ashamed of her disfigurement and unable to cope with what they saw as her limited prospects. The small inheritance from her grandmother had been just enough to finance this one-way journey to what she had hoped would be a fresh start. There was nothing and no one waiting for her back in Pennsylvania. "I'll manage," she said with more confidence than she felt. The station master studied her for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. "There's a boarding house down the main street run by Mrs. Bennett. Decent place, fair rates. You might stay there while figuring things out. And," he hesitated, "there's been talk about what happens to Reed's property. Man had no family to speak of, and the bank's trying to sort out the situation. Might be worth speaking to them, seeing." as you had an arrangement with Jackson. Sophia felt a flicker of hope ignite amidst her despair. Do you think they would consider my claim? Can't say for certain. Bank manager's name is Emmett, same fellow who's the town doctor. Wears both hats in a place this size. He's fair-minded, from what I've seen. The walk down Pinecrest Valley's main street was an exercise in dignity. Sophia had learned long ago to navigate the world without hands or arms, developing remarkable dexterity with her feet, shoulders, and mouth. Still, traveling alone presented challenges that required occasional assistance, and each time she needed to ask for help was a reminder of her vulnerability. The town was smaller than she had expected, a collection of wooden buildings clinging to the mountainside with determined persistence. Smoke rose from chimneys against the backdrop of snow-capped peaks, and the streets bustled with a mixture of miners, traders, and settlers. Several people stopped to stare openly at Sophia, their eyes drawn to her empty sleeves. But she had endured such scrutiny her entire adult life and forced herself to continue forward. Bennett's boarding house proved to be a two-story structure with a well-maintained exterior and curtained windows. Sophia paused at the bottom of the 3 steps leading to the front door, calculating her approach. Normally, she would use her shoulder or back to push doors open, but knocking presented a persistent challenge. Before she could devise a solution, the door swung open and a woman in her 50s emerged, arms full of linens. She stopped abruptly at the sight of Sophia, her eyes widening momentarily before her face composed into a professional smile. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Can I help you, miss? She asked, her gaze flickering briefly to Sophia's pinned sleeves. Are you Mrs. Bennett? I need accommodation and was told you might have a room available, Sophia explained. The woman nodded. I'm Hannah Bennett. I do have one room left, though it's small. 50 cents a night, includes breakfast and supper. She paused, studying Sophia more carefully. Will you be needing any particular arrangements? Sophia recognized the delicate inquiry for what it was. I manage most things independently, Mrs. Bennett. If there are tasks I cannot complete, I'll ask for assistance directly. Something like respect flickered across Mrs. Bennett's face. Very well, come in then. The room was indeed small, but scrupulously clean, with a narrow bed washstand and small window overlooking the street. Mrs. Bennett demonstrated unusual sensitivity by opening drawers and explaining the room's features without offering unwanted help, allowing Sophia to maintain her dignity. Supper's at 6, Mrs. Bennett informed her. There's a communal washroom at the end of the hall. Will you join us at the table, or would you prefer to eat here? The question was asked without judgment, and Sophia appreciated the thoughtfulness behind it. Many assumed she would want to hide away rather than eat in company where her different methods might draw attention. I'll join the table, Sophia decided. She had not come all this way to hide in shadows. Left alone, Sophia sank onto the bed, emotional and physical exhaustion washing over her in waves. Jackson's letters, carefully stored in her travel bag that had been modified with straps she could manage with her shoulders and neck, seemed to call to her. Using practiced movements of her feet, she removed her boots and opened the bag, extracting the bundle of correspondence with dexterous toes she had developed through years of necessity. Jackson's letters revealed a thoughtful, intelligent man who had come to Montana to escape the rigid expectations of his family in Boston. His words spoke of the beauty of the mountains, the challenges of building a life in this rugged country, and most importantly, his belief that true worth had nothing to do with physical wholeness. I've known too many whole-bodied men with broken spirits, he had written in one letter, and I've met individuals missing various parts who possessed more wholeness of character than anyone I've known. When you described losing your arms in that terrible accident, I didn't see limitation. I saw evidence of extraordinary courage and adaptability. Anyone who can rebuild a life after such a loss has exactly the spirit needed for frontier living. Those words had given Sophia hope that had sustained her through the difficult journey west. Now Jackson was gone, taking with him the future she had dared to imagine, yet leaving behind a property that might still offer her a chance at independence. The following morning, after a night of fitful sleep, Sophia made her way to the combination bank and medical office that served Pinecrest Valley. Dr. Emmett proved to be a tall, lanky man with intelligent eyes and a carefully trimmed beard. He greeted Sophia with professional courtesy, showing neither the excessive pity nor the discomfort that she often encountered. "Miss Morgan," he said after she had explained her situation, "I remember Jackson mentioning he was expecting someone special. He seemed quite impressed by your letters." As evening approached, Fletcher built a fire in the fireplace while Sophia continued exploring, mentally cataloging the challenges and advantages the property presented. The isolation was profound. No other homesteads were visible from the valley, and the trail to town would be impassable during heavy snowfall. Yet the cabin was well insulated, the root cellar stocked with preserved foods, and the design thoughtfully executed to maximize efficiency. "Tell me honestly," Sophia asked as they shared a simple meal by the fire, "do you think it would be possible for someone like me to manage this place?" Fletcher considered the question carefully before answering. "Winter up here would challenge anyone, arms or no arms. Isolation, cold, predators, they don't discriminate. But," he added, studying her face in the firelight, "I've noticed you have a way of approaching problems differently. Most folks I guide up here look at a task and see only the traditional way of doing it. You seem to immediately consider alternatives." Sophia nodded, recognizing the truth in his observation. When you lose your arms at 16, you either develop new approaches or you surrender to dependency. I chose the former. "That's exactly the kind of thinking that succeeds in the mountains," Fletcher replied. "The people who fail up here aren't necessarily the weakest physically. They're the ones who can't adapt when conditions change or expected methods don't work." That night, sleeping in what would have been her marriage bed, Sophia weighed the monumental decision before her. Taking on Jackson's property would mean months of isolation, physical challenges beyond anything she had yet attempted, and the very real possibility of failure that could cost her life. Returning to civilization meant safety, but also surrendering. The dream of independence that had brought her west. By morning, her mind was made up, though she kept her decision private until they returned to Pinecrest Valley. The journey down the mountain gave her time to consider practical matters, what supplies she would need, how she would manage specific tasks, and what modifications might make the property more accessible to her unique abilities. Dr. Emmett was waiting at the boarding house when they returned, his expression curious as Sophia dismounted with the practiced movements she had developed for managing without arms. "Well, Miss Morgan, what do you think of Reed's place?" Sophia met his gaze directly. "I'd like to discuss terms for taking over the property, Dr. Emmett. I believe I can make it work." The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded with what appeared to be approval. "I thought you might say that. Shall we meet at the bank tomorrow morning to discuss specifics?" The negotiation that followed was straightforward but intense. Dr. Emmett, representing the bank's interests, needed assurance that Sophia could maintain the property and meet the financial obligations. Sophia, with nothing but her determination as collateral, needed terms that would give her a realistic chance of success. $25 monthly for the first year, Dr. Emmett proposed, increasing to $35 thereafter until the remaining $200 is paid off. The bank retains right of repossession if payments fall more than 60 days behind. The terms were fair, even generous given the circumstances, but the financial commitment was still daunting. Sophia had less than $100 remaining from her savings, which meant she would need to generate income almost immediately. "I accept your terms," she said firmly, with one condition. "I'd like 60 days before the first payment is..." Due to allow me time to establish myself and develop income sources. Dr. Emmett considered, then nodded. That seems reasonable. But Miss Morgan, I must emphasize the seriousness of what you're undertaking. Winter is approaching rapidly. Once the heavy snows begin, you could be completely isolated until spring thaw, possibly 5 months with no outside contact. I understand the risks, Sophia assured him. I've spent the last 8 years overcoming challenges that most people considered impossible. This will be difficult, but not insurmountable. The papers were prepared and signed, Sophia using her practiced method of holding the pen with her toes, and by afternoon, she was officially the owner of Jackson Reed's homestead, renamed Morgan Valley in a quiet acknowledgement of her fresh start. The following days became a whirlwind of preparation. Sophia invested most of her remaining funds in essential supplies, food staples, medical necessities, tools modified for her use, and cold weather gear. Fletcher, who had become something of an ally, helped her identify priorities and develop solutions for the specific challenges she would face. The biggest threat isn't the cold or predators, he advised as they loaded supplies onto pack mules. It's isolation. The mind can play tricks when you're alone too long, especially during the dark winter months. Sophia had considered this. I've brought books, writing materials I can use with my feet, and projects to keep my mind engaged. Isolation doesn't frighten me as much as dependency. Mrs. Bennett provided unexpected support, helping Sophia modify clothing for easier dressing and undressing without arms, and teaching her preservation techniques for the garden produce that could still be salvaged from Jackson's overgrown plots. You're either the bravest or the most foolhardy woman I've ever met, Mrs. Bennett commented as she demonstrated how to pack preserves for transportation. Possibly both, Sophia smiled. Perhaps courage and foolishness are closer relations than we like to admit. On her final night in Pinecrest Valley, Dr. Emmett hosted a small gathering at the boarding house, ostensibly a farewell dinner, but serving also as an introduction of Sophia to key community members who might provide support or business opportunities in the future. Miss Morgan has taken over Jackson Reed's property, Dr. Emmett explained to the assembled guests. She'd be continuing his work and developing her own enterprises there. The reactions ranged from skepticism to cautious support, but Sophia was accustomed to having her capabilities questioned. She answered inquiries about her plans with confidence, detailing her skills as a seamstress, her knowledge of herbal remedies learned from her grandmother, and her ideas for adapting the property to maximize self-sufficiency. By evening's end, she had orders for 3 specialized quilts from the mayor's wife, an arrangement to supply healing salves to Dr. Emmett's practice, and tentative interest from Mr. Calloway in specialty garden items she might grow next season. As the gathering concluded, Fletcher approached with a small leather pouch. Emergency supplies, he explained. Matches, fishing hooks, medical necessities. Small things that could make the difference between life and death if other resources fail. The gesture touched Sophia deeply. Thank you for your help and guidance. I wouldn't have been able to prepare properly without your knowledge. Fletcher shook his head. You would have found a way. People like you always do. Dawn broke clear and cold on departure day. Fletcher and 2 hired men would accompany Sophia to the homestead, helping transport supplies and making some essential repairs before winter set in fully. The caravan of pack animals loaded with provisions drew curious onlookers as it prepared to leave town. As Sophia mounted her specially equipped horse, Dr. Emmett approached with a final piece of advice. The mountains test everyone who ventures into them, Miss Morgan. They don't care about your past or your physical condition, only your ability to adapt and persevere. Remember that when things get difficult. Sophia nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in his words. That's precisely why I'm going. The mountains will judge me by what I can do, not by what I lack. as the small party moved out of town and began the long ascent into the higher elevations, Sophia felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. The journey ahead would demand everything she had: her intelligence, her adaptability, her determination, and her courage. But for the first time since losing her arms, she was moving towards something rather than away from rejection and limitation. The mountains rose before her, majestic and indifferent to human frailty. Within their valleys and forests lay challenges that would either break her spirit or forge it into something stronger than she had ever imagined possible. Sophia Morgan, mail-order bride no longer, faced those mountains not as a victim seeking shelter, but as a woman determined to build a life on her own terms, without arms but with unbreakable resolve. "Thank you, Jackson," she whispered to the wind as they climbed higher, "for seeing me as whole when others saw only what was missing." The first snow fell on Morgan Valley 2 weeks after Sophia's arrival, blanketing the world in pristine white that glittered like diamonds in the morning sun. Standing on the cabin porch, Sophia watched her breath form clouds in the crisp air as she surveyed the transformation of her property. The preparations had been intense, every day from dawn until dusk spent winterizing buildings, organizing supplies, and learning the rhythms of this mountain sanctuary that was now her home. Fletcher and his men had stayed for 10 days, helping with essential repairs and modifications that would make the homestead more accessible to Sophia's unique abilities. Together, they had devised ingenious systems using pulleys, counterweights, and foot-operated mechanisms that allowed her to accomplish tasks that would normally require hands. Door latches had been redesigned to operate with pressure from her shoulders. Feeding systems for livestock utilized foot pedals to dispense measured amounts of grain. Even the fireplace had been modified with specialized tools she could manipulate with her feet to add logs and adjust the flames. The key to winter survival is routine, Fletcher had advised before departing. Know exactly where everything is, how much you have, and the most efficient way to use your resources. In blizzard conditions, you can't afford to waste energy searching for misplaced items or improvising solutions. Now alone, Sophia established daily patterns that maximized efficiency while conserving energy. She rose before dawn to kindle the fire using her specialized tools, tending livestock in the early morning light before temperatures dropped to their daily lows. Midday was devoted to indoor work, sewing quilts with her remarkably dexterous feet for her town customers, preparing preserved foods, and maintaining the cabin's warmth and cleanliness. Evenings were spent reading from Jackson's extensive library, or writing in her journal, recording observations and ideas that might improve her systems. The solitude was profound, occasionally broken only by the cry of an eagle or the distant howl of wolves. At first, the silence felt oppressive, and Sophia found herself speaking aloud simply to hear a human voice. Gradually, however, the quiet became a presence unto itself, not an absence of sound but a different kind of fullness that allowed her thoughts to expand and clarify in ways they never had in the noise of human society. "I understand now why you chose this place, Jackson," Sophia said one evening to the empty cabin. The habit of speaking to the man she had never met, but whose presence she felt throughout the homestead, had developed naturally. His books with careful margin notes, his ingenious designs, and his thoughtfully constructed spaces created a sense of ongoing dialogue across time. In Jackson's journals, which she read by the fireplace light, Sophia discovered a kindred spirit who had also fought against society's limitations. "The mountains don't care about my scars," he had written. "They demand capability and adaptability, not conformity to arbitrary standards of appearance or conventional methods." December brought the first serious test of Sophia's preparations, when a 3-day blizzard howled through the valley, dropping snow so deep it completely covered the lower windows of the cabin. The temperature plummeted to levels she had never experienced, transforming the interior walls into sheets of frost, despite the blazing fire she maintained day and night. The extreme conditions revealed weaknesses in her systems that demanded immediate solutions. The pulley mechanism for the chicken coop's feed dispenser froze solid, requiring her to improvise a new feeding method using body heat to thaw smaller portions of grain. The path to the barn became impassable, forcing Sophia to create a tunnel through snowdrifts using a shovel operated with her feet and shoulders in a painstaking process that left her exhausted but triumphant. Most challenging was maintaining her own physical well-being. Dressing and undressing in the bitter cold required extraordinary patience and dexterity. Cooking meals without risking burns demanded careful planning and specialized tools. Even sleep became a tactical consideration as she developed a method of wrapping herself in layers that would stay secure through the night without arms to adjust them. Yet with each problem solved, Sophia's confidence grew. The woman who had been pitied and dismissed in civilization was thriving in conditions that would challenge even those with all their limbs intact. Her body grew stronger, her movements more efficient, and her mind increasingly focused on possibilities rather than limitations. "The cold doesn't know I have no arms," she wrote in her journal during those bitter December days. "It threatens everyone equally, which makes the challenge oddly fair. For once, I am not at any special disadvantage. We are all equally small before the mountain winter." Christmas arrived with another blizzard that confined Sophia to the cabin for 4 days. She marked the holiday by baking bread using a recipe from Jackson's notebooks, adapted to methods she could manage with her feet. The simple celebration, though solitary, filled her with unexpected contentment. In Pennsylvania, holidays had been painful reminders of her difference, with family members awkwardly trying to include her while clearly seeing her as broken. Here, in the honest simplicity of survival, she felt more whole than she ever had amid the trappings of civilization. January brought the deepest cold, days when the world outside seemed frozen in suspended animation, when breath crystallized instantly and even the hardy mountain wildlife fell silent in conservation of precious energy. Sophia's world contracted to essential activities only, maintaining heat, providing for the livestock that depended on her, and preserving her own strength through careful rationing of food and effort. The isolation that Mrs. Bennett had warned might affect her mind became both challenge and unexpected gift. Without distractions, Sophia found herself thinking with unusual clarity about her life before the accident, the years of struggling for independence afterward, and the strange journey that had brought her to this remote valley. The insights that emerged surprised her with their depth and occasional painful honesty. "I spent so many years defining myself by what I have lost," she wrote during a particularly reflective evening. "But what if my arms were never what made me valuable in the first place? What if losing them simply forced me to discover strengths I might never have found otherwise?" The question lingered, challenging fundamental assumptions about worth and ability that had shaped her understanding of herself since the accident. In the profound silence of mountain winter, Sophia began to separate physical capability from personal value in ways that transformed her relationship with her own body. Mid-January brought the first serious threat to Sophia's sanctuary when a pack of wolves, driven by hunger to abandon their usual hunting grounds, began circling her property at dusk. She first noticed their presence when the livestock grew agitated, the cow bellowing in fear and the chickens clustering in panicked groups inside their coop. From the cabin window, Sophia counted 6 lean, hungry predators testing the boundaries of her small domain. The threat was immediate and potentially devastating. If she lost her livestock, her chances of surviving until spring would diminish dramatically. Yet without arms, traditional defense methods like firearms were impractical. Rather than succumb to panic, Sophia studied the wolves' behavior carefully over several nights, noting patterns in their movements and reactions to various stimuli. Drawing on information from Jackson's journals about local wildlife, she developed a strategy that used her resources creatively rather than relying on conventional weapons. Using a system of counterweights and foot-operated triggers, Sophia created noise-making devices positioned at strategic locations around the property. She prepared mixtures of cayenne pepper and other strong-smelling substances that she could deploy along likely approach routes. Most cleverly, she developed a method of maintaining small, controlled fires at key points that created a barrier of light, smell, and heat that the wolves were reluctant to cross. The strategy required exhausting vigilance for nearly 2 weeks, with Sophia sleeping only in brief intervals and constantly adjusting her defenses based on the wolves' changing tactics. By the end of January, the pack had moved on to easier hunting grounds, leaving her livestock intact and providing Sophia with another victory against seemingly impossible odds. "The wolves taught me something essential," she recorded in her journal. "They approached me as they would any threat to their survival, not as a disabled woman, but as a competitor for scarce resources. There was something profoundly equalizing in that honest assessment of me as simply another creature fighting for survival." February brought increasing light but sustained cold, with brief thaws followed by refreezing that created treacherous ice across the property. During one such period, Sophia suffered her first serious setback when she fell on the path to the barn, striking her head against frozen ground. The injury itself was minor, a cut and swelling that would heal naturally, but the incident forced her to confront the precariousness of her situation. Alone and without arms, even a moderate injury could become life-threatening if it affected her mobility or thinking. For the first time since arriving at the homestead, genuine fear gripped her. Sophia spent 2 days in the cabin, nursing her injury and contemplating the very real possibility that she might not survive until spring. The thoughts that emerged from this dark period were not what she might have expected. Rather than regret or self-pity, she found herself reflecting on the extraordinary freedom and self-reliance she had experienced during her months in the mountains. "Even if I were to die here," she wrote, her foot-held pencil steady despite the gravity of the words, "I would have known what it means to live on my own terms, to be judged not by what I lack, but by what I can create and sustain." Few people, with or without arms, ever experience such complete agency over their existence. The realization was transformative. The fear remained. Sophia was too practical to ignore real dangers, but it was balanced by a profound appreciation for the life she had claimed for herself. She implemented new safety protocols, moving more carefully across ice and developing emergency response plans for various injury scenarios. But she refused to surrender the independence that had become as essential to her as breathing. As February progressed, Sophia noticed subtle changes in the quality of light and air that suggested the approaching end of deep winter. The sun lingered longer each day, and occasional warm winds from the south brought brief respites from the bitter cold. Though spring was still months away, the psychological effect of these small changes was powerful, renewing her determination and energy. The additional daylight allowed Sophia to expand her activities, beginning preparations for the growing season that would be crucial to her long-term success. Using her feet, she sorted seeds found in Jackson's carefully labeled storage containers, planned garden expansions based on his detailed notes about soil conditions, and sketched designs for tools that would allow her to cultivate and harvest efficiently without arms. Jackson understood something essential about mountain living, she observed in her journal. "Success here doesn't come from brute strength or conventional methods. It comes from observation, adaptation, and working with natural patterns rather than imposing human expectations on them." In his agricultural journals, Jackson had documented numerous techniques that minimized physical labor while maximizing yields: terraced beds that used gravity for irrigation, companion planting that reduced the need for pest control, and sequential harvesting that spread work over manageable periods. His methods, though not specifically designed for someone without arms, reflected a philosophy of efficiency and innovation that aligned perfectly with Sophia's needs. The most unexpected development of late winter came in the form of a dream that repeated with increasing clarity throughout February. In it, Sophia stood in a sunlit clearing surrounded by people, not the judgmental crowds she had known in Pennsylvania, but individuals with various physical differences similar to her own. Some lacked limbs, others moved in unconventional ways, but all worked with confidence and purpose, creating a community where adaptation was the norm rather than the exception. The dream persisted, becoming more detailed with each occurrence until Sophia began recording its elements in her journal, sketching layouts of buildings and spaces designed for maximum accessibility, noting methods by which people with different capabilities collaborated to accomplish complex tasks. What if, she wrote after one particularly vivid iteration, a place existed where difference was not merely accommodated, but became the foundation for innovation? Where the need to adapt created solutions that ultimately benefited everyone. The question became a thought experiment that occupied her mind during long winter evenings. She designed theoretical buildings where conventional assumptions about physical ability didn't determine architecture. She imagined work systems where tasks were assigned based on individual strengths, rather than arbitrary standards of normalcy. She envisioned agricultural methods that could be managed by people with diverse physical capabilities working in coordinated teams. The exercise began as mental diversion during isolation, but gradually transformed into something more concrete. A vision for what Morgan Valley might become beyond mere personal survival. The hundreds of acres surrounding her cabin, currently empty wilderness, represented potential far beyond what she alone could develop. But as a foundation for a different kind of community, one built from the ground up around principles of adaptation and innovation rather than conformity. The possibilities seemed suddenly vast. Jackson chose this valley for isolation from judgment, Sophia realized. But what if instead of hiding from the world's limitations, this land could demonstrate a different way of building community altogether? The seed of this idea took root alongside the literal seeds she was preparing for spring planting, growing stronger as winter began its slow retreat from the mountains. It gave her solitary days new purpose beyond basic survival, infusing her work with meaning that extended beyond her individual circumstances. March arrived with increasing signs of winter's loosening grip, longer days, occasional birdsong returning to the forests, and periodic thaws that revealed patches of earth beneath thinning snow. The changes brought practical challenges as melting snow created muddy conditions and potential flooding in low-lying areas of the property. Sophia monitored the situation carefully, using Jackson's detailed topographical notes to predict water flow and taking preventive measures where possible. It was during one such assessment that she noticed smoke rising from the forest, approximately a mile north of her cabin, the first indication of another human presence since Fletcher's departure months earlier. The sight triggered conflicting emotions, caution born from vulnerability, but also a hunger for human contact after so many months of isolation. Sophia observed the smoke for 2 days before making a decision. On the third morning, she packed essential supplies in a modified bag she could carry suspended from her shoulders, left extra food and water for the livestock, and set out toward the mysterious campsite. The journey through lingering snow and early spring mud was arduous. Without arms for balance on uneven terrain, Sophia had to move slowly and deliberately, using her core strength and careful foot placement to navigate. It took nearly 3 hours to cover the distance, following game trails and natural contours that offered the easiest passage. As she approached the source of the smoke, Sophia proceeded with increasing caution, aware of her vulnerability if the stranger proved hostile. The camp came into view gradually, a simple lean-to constructed against a rock formation, a small fire, and a single figure huddled beside it. The man didn't notice her approach immediately, giving Sophia time to observe details that told a story. His clothes were ragged but not filthy, suggesting recent hardship rather than chronic homelessness. A splint and bandages on his left leg explained his presence in this remote location, injured and unable to travel. Most significantly, his campsite showed the organization and efficiency of someone with wilderness experience rather than panicked improvisation. When he finally sensed her presence and looked up, his reaction confirmed her assessment. Surprise registered on his weathered face, but not alarm or aggression, merely the startled recognition that he was no longer alone. "Hello," Sophia called from a prudent distance. "I've been watching your smoke for several days. I have a cabin about a mile south of here." The man straightened, grimacing slightly at the movement of his injured leg. He appeared to be in his late 30s with a trimmed beard threaded with gray and intelligent eyes that assessed Sophia with equal care. "Ma'am," he responded with a slight nod, "Nathan Blackwood. I'd stand to greet you properly, but—" He gestured to his splinted leg. "Sophia Morgan," she replied, moving closer now that initial contact had been established without hostility. "What happened to your leg?" "Fell crossing a stream about 5 days back," Nathan explained. "The ice gave way. Managed to drag myself here and set up camp, but the break's bad enough I can't put weight on it. Was hoping to heal enough to reach town, but it's slow going." As she came fully into view, Nathan's eyes registered her missing arms, widening briefly before returning to her face with deliberate control. Sophia had seen the progression countless times: surprise, reassessment, adjustment, but unlike many, Nathan completed the sequence without settling into pity or discomfort. "Looks like we've both faced challenges recently," he observed with unexpected directness, "though yours appears more permanent than mine." The acknowledgement without awkwardness was refreshing. "8 years now," Sophia confirmed. "Factory accident. But it seems your temporary condition is the more immediate problem." "Have you examined the break yourself?" Nathan nodded. "Clean break, I think, not compound. But without proper setting and rest, I won't be walking normally anytime soon." Sophia assessed the situation quickly. "My cabin is better equipped for recovery than this camp. I have medical supplies, proper shelter, and food. If you can manage the journey with my guidance, you'd heal faster there." Wariness flickered across Nathan's face, the natural caution of a wilderness traveler confronted with an unexpected offer from a stranger. "That's generous, but I wouldn't want to impose. And frankly, ma'am, I'm not sure how much help I could be to you with this leg, while taking up your resources." Sophia recognized the concern behind his words, not just wariness of a stranger, but the deeply ingrained belief that without physical capability, a person became a burden rather than an asset. It was a fear she understood intimately. "Mr. Blackwood," she said evenly, "I've survived alone through the harshest months of winter without arms. I don't need physical assistance. What I could use is information about conditions beyond my valley, and perhaps some knowledge you've gained in your travels. Fair exchange isn't about identical capabilities, it's about complementary contributions." The clarity of this perspective seemed to surprise Nathan. He studied her with new interest, reassessing assumptions. "When you put it that way, I do have information that might be valuable. I've been mapping the Northern Territories for the past 3 years. Knowledge of water sources, game trails, mineral deposits. Exactly the kind of information that would be useful to someone establishing a homestead," Sophia confirmed. "Now, can you walk with support, or will we need to create a travois?" By sundown, they had managed the arduous journey back to Sophia's cabin, Nathan hobbling with the aid of a sturdy branch, resting frequently, and following the easiest path Sophia could identify through her knowledge of the local terrain. The shared challenge of the journey established a foundation of mutual respect that transcended conventional social interactions. Neither could have completed it alone. Nathan needed Sophia's knowledge of the land and her support during difficult passages, while Sophia benefited from his height in spotting distant landmarks and his strength in clearing occasional obstacles. Settled in the cabin as darkness fell, with Nathan's leg properly set and bandaged using supplies from Jackson's well-stocked medical chest, they shared a meal that represented luxury after months of purely functional eating. Sophia had preserved the last of her winter vegetables for celebration of spring's arrival, and the addition of herbs and spices from her dwindling stores transformed simple ingredients into a feast. "This is remarkable," Nathan commented, watching as Sophia deftly manipulated cooking implements with her feet. "Not just the meal, but everything you've built here. Most people with all their limbs intact couldn't manage what you've accomplished." "Alone, necessity drives innovation," Sophia replied simply. "When conventional methods aren't available, you discover alternatives or you perish." As the evening progressed, Nathan shared news from beyond the mountains, political developments in the territorial capital, economic changes affecting mining, communities, and weather patterns observed during his mapping expeditions. The information was practical rather than merely conversational, giving Sophia context for planning her future endeavors. In turn, she described her experiences through the winter, the systems she had developed for managing the homestead, and her emerging vision for what the valley might become. To her surprise, Nathan listened with genuine interest rather than patronizing tolerance, asking insightful questions that helped clarify her own thinking. "You're describing something revolutionary," he observed as she outlined her concept for a community built around principles of adaptation. Not charity for those society considers broken, but a fundamental rethinking of how environments and tasks could be designed to accommodate different capabilities. "Exactly," Sophia confirmed, pleased by his quick understanding. "Most buildings and tools are designed with assumptions about physical capability that exclude countless people unnecessarily. Even simple modifications could make spaces accessible to nearly everyone if we started with different premises." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "During my mapping work, I've encountered several settlements that failed not because the location was untenable, but because they approached frontier challenges with rigid methods. The ones that thrived were invariably those that adapted to local conditions rather than trying to impose familiar patterns from elsewhere." The conversation continued late into the night, ranging from practical considerations of sustainable agriculture to philosophical questions about the relationship between physical capacity and human worth. As the fire burned down to embers, Sophia realized she had experienced something precious beyond the simple relief of human contact, genuine, intellectual engagement with someone who saw her ideas rather than just her physical difference. In the days that followed, Nathan's presence transformed Sophia's daily rhythms. Though his mobility remained limited, he contributed to the homestead's operation through his knowledge of wilderness resources, mechanical aptitude, and willingness to adapt to unconventional methods. Together, they refined the system Sophia had developed, incorporating Nathan's engineering insights to improve efficiency and reliability. Most significantly, Nathan approached collaboration with Sophia as a partnership of equals rather than offering unwanted help or expressing amazement at her capabilities. He recognized when she needed assistance, but never assumed limitation, creating a working relationship based on complementary strengths rather than compensation for perceived deficits. "You know," he commented one afternoon as they repaired a broken hinge on the chicken coop, "most people would see our current situation as ironic, the man with the broken leg and the woman with no arms helping each other. But that's fundamentally how human communities have always functioned at their best. No one has every capability. We survive through combined strengths." The observation crystallized something Sophia had been considering throughout the winter. That's precisely what conventional society misunderstands about people like me. They see only what's missing rather than the adaptive capabilities that develop in response to difference. In focusing on the absence, they miss the innovation. As March progressed and Nathan's leg began to heal, their conversations increasingly focused on practical applications of this philosophy. Using Jackson's detailed maps of the valley and Nathan's broader geographical knowledge, they identified locations suitable for different types of development, agricultural areas with optimal soil conditions, building sites protected from severe weather, water sources that could support expanded needs. The valley could sustain a community of perhaps 50 people comfortably, Nathan estimated, examining the maps spread across the kitchen table. More if agricultural methods were intensified. The real question is what kind of community it would be. The question lingered as spring's first genuine warmth began to transform the valley. Snow retreated to shaded areas and high elevations, revealing the rich potential of soil eager for cultivation. Birdsong filled the forests as migratory species returned, and green shoots emerged from earth that had been frozen solid just weeks earlier. As April approached, bringing the promise of genuine spring, Sophia recognized that she stood at a crossroads far more significant than her original decision to claim Jackson's homestead. The winter had proven she could survive alone through the harshest conditions. Nathan's arrival had demonstrated the power of complementary capabilities. The question now was whether to maintain her hard-won solitude or pursue the larger vision, taking shape in her mind, a community that might transform not just her own life but understanding of human potential itself. The woman who had arrived as a mail-order bride with nothing but hope and determination now contemplated becoming the founder of something unprecedented. As the ice continued its retreat from Morgan Valley, Sophia Morgan prepared to extend the boundaries of possibility far beyond what anyone, including herself, had ever imagined for a woman with no arms. Spring unfurled across Morgan Valley with breathtaking swiftness, transforming the landscape from monochromatic winter to vibrant new life in what seemed like mere days. The creek that had been silent beneath ice now bubbled with snowmelt, wildflowers, carpeted meadows in purple and gold, and birdsong filled the air from dawn until dusk. For Sophia, who had endured months of isolation and brutal cold, the renewal represented more than seasonal change. It symbolized the blossoming of possibilities beyond mere survival. Nathan's leg had healed sufficiently for him to walk short distances, though the injury still prevented his return to mapping expeditions. His continued presence became the catalyst for expanding Sophia's vision from theoretical possibility to practical planning. Together, they developed detailed designs for what they began calling Adaptation Valley, a community deliberately structured to accommodate diverse physical capabilities while maximizing the potential contributions of all residents. The fundamental principle, Sophia explained as they sketched building designs using a drawing board Nathan had modified for her to operate with her feet, is that environments should adapt to people, not the other way around. Traditional architecture and tools assume specific physical capabilities that exclude many unnecessarily. Nathan nodded, adding detail to their drawing of a communal workshop with adjustable height workstations and tools designed for operation by feet, mouth, or mechanical assistance devices. Most design limitations exist not because alternatives are impossible, but because convention becomes mistaken for necessity. Their complementary skills created a synergy that accelerated development. Sophia's extraordinary dexterity with her feet and practical experience adapting daily tasks provided the foundation, while Nathan's engineering knowledge and broader geographical understanding supplied technical solutions and context. Together, they reimagined everything from agricultural methods to building construction with fresh perspectives that challenged fundamental assumptions about physical capability. As April progressed, the theoretical planning transformed into practical action. Using lumber salvaged from abandoned mining structures Nathan had discovered during his explorations, they began constructing prototypes of specialized tools and adaptable workspaces. The first successful creation was a gardening system that allowed Sophia to plant, weed, and harvest using primarily foot controls and specialized implements that required minimal dexterity. This would work equally well for someone with limited leg mobility but functional arms, Nathan observed as they tested the system. That's the beauty of adaptive design. Solutions developed for one type of difference often benefit others unexpectedly. The observation proved prescient when their innovative approach attracted its first unexpected participant. On a mild morning in late April, Sophia was working in the expanded garden when she noticed a figure approaching from the forest edge, a man moving with the distinctive gait of someone using crutches. As he drew closer, Sophia recognized Ethan Fletcher, her original guide to the valley, though his appearance had changed dramatically. His left leg was missing below the knee, the trouser neatly pinned up in a manner reminiscent of Sophia's own pinned sleeves. "Miss Morgan," Fletcher called as he approached. "Heard you survived the winter. Came to see for myself." His eyes registered Nathan's presence with brief surprise before returning to Sophia. "Mr. Fletcher," Sophia replied, setting aside her gardening tool. "What happened to your leg?" "Trapping accident in February," Fletcher explained with characteristic terseness. "Infection set in. Dr. Emmett took it to save my life." He gestured toward the garden with his chin. "Town's talking about what you've accomplished up here. Some saying it's impossible for a woman with no arms to manage a homestead. Came to see the truth myself." Sophia invited Fletcher to rest and share their midday meal, during which he observed her methods for managing daily tasks with undisguised interest. She demonstrated the specialized tools and adaptations that allowed her to cook, clean, and maintain the property independently, while Nathan explained the engineering principles behind their more complex systems. "Never seen anything like this," Fletcher commented, examining a foot-operated device that allowed Sophia to chop vegetables. "Been struggling since losing my leg. Trapping and guiding were my life, but can't manage the terrain anymore with one leg. Been sitting in town feeling useless." The admission, plainly stated without self-pity, resonated deeply with Sophia's own experience after losing her arms. "The problem isn't your missing leg, Mr. Fletcher. It's that everything is designed assuming people have two." Fletcher's gaze sharpened with sudden understanding. "You're saying there's another way to approach it?" "Many other ways," Nathan interjected. "We've been developing systems that don't require traditional physical capabilities. Your knowledge of tracking, wildlife, and local terrain would be invaluable to our work here." Sophia explained their vision for Adaptation Valley, emphasizing the core principle that contribution mattered more than conventional physical completeness. As Fletcher listened, his expression transformed from skepticism to cautious interest. "Are you proposing I join whatever you're building here?" he asked finally. "We're proposing that your experience and knowledge remain valuable despite your changed physical condition," Sophia clarified. "And that together we might create approaches to frontier living that don't exclude people based on arbitrary physical standards." Fletcher stayed 3 days, during which he moved from observer to active participant in their projects. His extensive knowledge of local wildlife and plant resources proved immediately valuable as they expanded agricultural areas, while his experience with trail creation helped them develop accessible pathways between different areas of the property. Most significantly, Fletcher brought news from Pinecrest Valley that placed their work in broader context. The harsh winter had increased physical injuries throughout the region, leaving numerous people with temporary or permanent disabilities that prevented them from contributing through conventional means. Economic hardship followed, with families struggling to support members considered unable to work. "Towns become a difficult place for anyone who doesn't fit the mold of able-bodied worker," Fletcher explained. "There's charity for those seen as deserving, but no real place for people who want to contribute, despite different capabilities." The information confirmed Sophia's intuition that their work might address needs beyond their personal circumstances. What had begun as adaptations for her specific condition could potentially transform life options for many others facing similar exclusion from meaningful work and community participation. On his fourth day at the homestead, Fletcher made his decision. "I'd like to be part of what you're building here," he announced during breakfast. "My guiding days may be over, but I still have skills worth contributing. And truthfully, I'd rather build something new than be pitied in town." With Fletcher's commitment, Adaptation Valley gained its third founding member. More importantly, it established a pattern that would define the community's future growth. People with diverse physical differences, bringing specialized knowledge. That contributed to collective thriving rather than focusing on individual limitations. Word spread throughout the region with surprising speed. By mid-May, the homestead had received visits from 7 people with various physical differences, each drawn by rumors of a place where capability rather than conformity determined value. Some stayed only briefly, skeptical that the ambitious vision could become reality. Others, like Maria Alvarez, a seamstress who had lost 3 fingers to frostbite during the winter, recognized the potential immediately and committed to joining the community once basic infrastructure could accommodate additional residents. "In town they say I'm finished as a seamstress," Maria explained, demonstrating the modified techniques she had developed to continue her craft despite her injury. "But I can still create beautiful work, just differently. Why should arbitrary standards of how sewing should be done determine whether my skills have value?" The question encapsulated the philosophy emerging at the heart of Adaptation Valley. Each new visitor brought not just physical differences, but innovative approaches developed through necessity, practical wisdom that, when shared, created a growing repository of alternative methods for accomplishing essential tasks. Development accelerated with each new contributor. Samuel Chun, a carpenter who had lost an eye and suffered partial paralysis on his left side after a stroke, brought expertise in structural design that proved invaluable as they began constructing additional living quarters. Rebecca Williams, whose severe arthritis limited fine motor control but left her mind sharp as ever, contributed knowledge of medicinal plants and preservation techniques that expanded their healthcare and food storage capabilities. By early June, the original homestead had transformed into the nucleus of a genuine community. New cabins, constructed with accessibility features integrated from the ground up rather than added as afterthoughts, housed 7 permanent residents. Gardens expanded to include specialized sections for medicinal herbs, dye plants, and diverse food crops. A communal workshop housed tools designed or modified for operation by people with various physical configurations. Most significantly, a distinctive community ethos emerged, one that valued problem-solving, innovation, and mutual support without charity or pity. When faced with challenges, residents instinctively asked, "How might we approach this differently?" rather than assuming inability. The question led to solutions that often improved efficiency and safety for everyone, not just those with specific differences. "What we're discovering," Sophia observed during a community planning meeting, "is that designing for diverse capabilities often creates better systems overall. When we eliminate unnecessary physical requirements, we free people to contribute their true strengths regardless of physical configuration." The observation proved prescient when Dr. Emmett arrived unexpectedly in mid-June, bringing not only much-needed medical supplies, but also professional curiosity about what he had been hearing from visitors to the valley. The doctor spent 2 days observing the community's operations, paying particular attention to the adaptive technologies and methods that enabled residents to manage frontier challenges despite physical differences. "This is remarkable," he commented during the community dinner on his second evening. "When I sent you up here, Miss Morgan, I honestly wasn't certain you'd survive the winter. Instead, you've created innovations that could transform life throughout the territory for countless people." The validation from a respected professional reinforced the community's growing confidence in their approach. Dr. Emmett's visit also brought practical benefits. Beyond moral support, he conducted thorough medical examinations of all residents, provided treatments for chronic conditions, and most importantly, arranged for official recognition of their land claims through the territorial government. "I've submitted documentation establishing this as a legitimate settlement," Dr. Emmett explained. "Each resident can file individual claims for portions of the valley, creating legal protection for what you're building here." The legal recognition represented a turning point. What had begun as adaptations for personal survival now had potential to influence territorial development policy more broadly. Dr. Emmett's reports to government officials highlighted the economic efficiency of the community's innovations and their potential application throughout the region. "The territorial governor is particularly interested in your agricultural methods," the doctor informed them. "The adjustable height raised beds and irrigation systems you've developed could increase food production in areas with limited labor availability." As word of the settlement's success spread, its influence extended beyond those with physical differences. In July, the community welcomed Jonathan Miller, a former school teacher who had lost his position in Pinecrest Valley after expressing unconventional educational ideas. Though physically typical, Miller recognized in Adaptation Valley a place where innovation was valued above conformity. "What you're creating here isn't just about physical adaptation," Miller observed after his first week in residence. "It's about approaching all aspects of frontier life with fresh perspectives rather than imported assumptions." That philosophy applies to education as much as building design. Miller's insights helped clarify the community's broader significance. While founded on principles of physical accessibility, Adaptation Valley was evolving into something more comprehensive, a living laboratory for rethinking fundamental assumptions about community design, resource allocation, and human capability. The settlement's growing reputation brought both opportunities and challenges. By August, the population had increased to 17 permanent residents, plus several temporary visitors evaluating potential membership. The growth strained existing resources and tested governance structures that had evolved organically during the early months. "We need more formal systems for decision-making and resource allocation," Nathan pointed out during a community meeting held to address these challenges. "The informal approach worked when we were few, but with continued growth, we need clarity about how choices are made." The conversation that followed revealed the community's distinctive character. Rather than defaulting to traditional hierarchy or simple majority rule, residents collaborated to design governance structures that reflected their core principle of diverse contribution. The resulting system emphasized specialized knowledge in different domains, with working groups focused on agriculture, construction, education, and healthcare, making recommendations to the full community for final decisions. Sophia's role evolved accordingly. While respected as the original homesteader whose vision had catalyzed the community, she increasingly functioned as facilitator rather than leader, helping integrate diverse perspectives into coherent plans while encouraging innovation from all quarters. "What makes Adaptation Valley unique isn't any single person's vision," she noted during the governance discussion. "It's our collective willingness to question assumptions and find new approaches." Leadership should foster that spirit rather than direct specific outcomes. The philosophy was tested when disagreements emerged about development priorities. Some residents advocated focusing on agricultural expansion to ensure food security before winter returned. Others emphasized construction of additional housing and communal buildings to accommodate expected growth. Still others prioritized outreach to territorial officials to secure additional resources and recognition. Rather than treating these perspectives as competing, the community developed a pattern of integrated planning that incorporated elements from each approach. Agricultural innovations would be developed alongside new construction, with both designed to demonstrate principles that might influence territorial policy. The balanced approach reflected their emerging understanding that adaptation applied not just to physical differences, but to complex problem-solving across domains. August brought an unexpected opportunity when a territorial surveyor arrived to assess the settlement as part of a broader evaluation of development in the region. Harold Matthews, a fastidious government official with 20 years' experience mapping frontier settlements, initially approached Adaptation Valley with barely concealed skepticism. "I've documented hundreds of frontier communities," Matthews explained during his initial meeting with residents. "Most fail within 2 years due to inadequate planning, resource limitations, or social conflict. Those founded on idealistic principles tend to collapse fastest." The assessment stung, but rather than becoming defensive, community members invited Matthews to observe their operations thoroughly, participate in their decision-making processes, and examine their plans for sustainable development. The surveyor's methodical documentation created a valuable external perspective that helped identify both strengths and vulnerabilities in their approach. "Your agricultural innovations are genuinely impressive," Matthews acknowledged after a week of observation. "The water management systems in particular represent significant improvements over standard methods. However, your construction techniques require refinement for durability in extreme weather conditions." The balanced feedback provided focus for improvement efforts while validating their core innovations. Matthews' official report, submitted to territorial authorities in late August, described Adaptation Valley as an unconventional but potentially significant development in frontier settlement patterns, demonstrating viable alternatives for individuals previously excluded from meaningful participation in territorial expansion. The cautiously positive assessment opened doors to resources previously unavailable. The territorial government approved modest funding for an experimental program testing the community's agricultural methods in other settlements. More significantly, Matthews' report legitimized Adaptation Valley in the eyes of officials who might otherwise have dismissed it as an oddity rather than a meaningful innovation. This external validation coincided with the community's preparations for their first winter as a collective rather than isolated individuals. The experiences of the previous winter, particularly Sophia's successful solo survival, provided valuable guidance, but the increased population created new challenges in food storage, heating fuel requirements, and living space. "We need to approach winter preparation systematically," Sophia advised during a planning session in early September. "Individual survival is one thing. Collective thriving through 5 months of potential isolation is another entirely." The community divided responsibilities according to capability rather than conventional roles. Those with experience in preservation techniques coordinated food storage efforts. Residents with construction knowledge directed wood gathering and preparation. Medical expertise determined necessary supplies and emergency protocols. Most innovatively, they developed a capability inventory that documented each resident's unique strengths and limitations, creating a comprehensive understanding of community resources that extended beyond physical capabilities to include knowledge, skills, and perspectives. The approach transformed what might have been seen as a collection of disabled individuals into a remarkably capable collective, each difference contributing to adaptive capacity rather than detracting from it. As autumn painted the surrounding forests in brilliant gold and crimson, Adaptation Valley bore little resemblance to the isolated homestead where Sophia had spent the previous winter. New structures surrounded the original cabin, gardens had expanded tenfold, and pathways connected various areas in an integrated design that prioritized accessibility without sacrificing beauty or function. More profoundly, the community had developed a distinctive culture based on continuous innovation, mutual respect, and the fundamental premise that human worth transcended physical configuration. When new challenges emerged, residents instinctively approached them with creative problem-solving rather than predetermined methods, drawing on their diverse perspectives to develop solutions that often surprised outside observers with their elegance and effectiveness. The transformation was perhaps most evident in Sophia herself, the woman who had arrived as a mail-order bride, seeking acceptance from a man she had never met, had become a respected founder whose vision was reshaping understanding of human capability. Throughout the territory, her missing arms, once a source of shame and limitation, had become the catalyst for innovations that benefited dozens directly and potentially thousands indirectly as their methods spread. "I never imagined this outcome when I claimed Jackson's homestead," Sophia admitted to Nathan during a rare quiet moment as they watched the sunset paint the valley in golden light. "I hoped merely to prove I could survive independently. The idea that my adaptations might form the foundation for an entire community approach to frontier living seemed impossible." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "That's the irony. What society defined as your greatest limitation became the source of your greatest contribution. By forcing you to find different approaches, your missing arms led to innovations that might never have emerged otherwise." The observation crystallized something Sophia had been considering throughout the community's development. Perhaps that's true for all of us here. What if the characteristics that society defines as disabilities are actually sources of diversity that strengthen the whole? What if we've been measuring human value by entirely the wrong standards? The question lingered as autumn deepened. Toward winter, territorial officials, intrigued by Matthew's reports, arranged for a formal delegation to visit Adaptation Valley before snow made travel impossible. The planned visit created both excitement and anxiety among residents, who recognized the potential significance of official recognition while fearing misunderstanding or condescension from authorities accustomed to conventional settlements. Preparation for the delegation's arrival became a catalyst for articulating the community's core principles more explicitly than ever before. Residents collaborated to document their innovations, quantify their productivity, and demonstrate the economic viability of their approach beyond mere humanitarian considerations. "We need to show them that adaptive design isn't charity. It's practical innovation that increases frontier productivity by including more contributors," Fletcher emphasized during planning sessions. "This isn't about accommodating those society considers broken. It's about recognizing that diverse capabilities strengthen communities." As the first snow dusted the surrounding peaks in early October, Adaptation Valley stood poised at a threshold between isolated experiment and influential model. The community that had begun with one woman's determination to prove her worth, despite missing arms, had evolved into a living demonstration that human capability transcended conventional physical standards. The territorial delegation would arrive within days, bringing potential resources and recognition, but also scrutiny and judgment. Whatever the outcome, Sophia and her fellow residents had already proven something profound: that limitations imposed by society rather than nature were the true barriers to human thriving, and that when those artificial limitations were removed, extraordinary possibilities emerged from the very differences that had once been grounds for exclusion. As Sophia reviewed preparations for the delegation's visit, she reflected on Jackson Reed's words from the unfinished letter she had found upon her arrival. "I've been preparing the cabin for your arrival, making adjustments that I hope will prove useful." Though Jackson had never completed his thought, Adaptation Valley had become the ultimate fulfillment of his intention, a place where adjustments to the environment, rather than expectations of physical conformity, created possibilities for genuine belonging and contribution. The mail-order bride who had arrived with missing arms had found far more than the acceptance she had sought from a stranger. She had discovered that being perfect as you are meant not conforming to arbitrary physical standards, but recognizing that every human configuration brought unique perspectives that, when valued properly, could transform not just individual lives but entire communities. The mountain man's promised affirmation had expanded from personal acceptance to a philosophy that was reshaping understanding of human capability throughout the territory, proof that limitation, when approached with creativity rather than resignation, could become the unexpected foundation for unprecedented innovation. 5 years after Sophia Morgan stepped off the stagecoach with empty sleeves pinned to her shoulders, Adaptation Valley had transformed beyond anyone's most optimistic predictions. What began as one woman's desperate attempt to prove her worth had blossomed into a thriving community of 47 permanent residents with influence extending throughout the Montana Territory and beyond. The territorial delegation's visit that autumn day 5 years earlier had marked the pivotal turning point. Governor William Harrison himself had made the journey, accompanied by officials from agriculture, education, and territorial development. Their skepticism had been palpable upon arrival, political courtesy masking doubts about the viability of a settlement founded by those society typically dismissed as helpless. I confess I expected to find an admirable but impractical experiment, Governor Harrison had admitted at the conclusion of that first visit. Instead, I've witnessed innovations that could revolutionize frontier development throughout the territories. Your agricultural yields exceed territorial averages by 30% while using fewer resources. Your building designs incorporate efficiencies that could benefit every settlement in Montana. The validation had brought more than praise. It had secured critical resources. The territorial government had provided grants for expanding agricultural research, documentation of adaptive building techniques, and establishment of training programs that shared Adaptation Valley's innovations with other communities. More significantly, the governor's endorsement had legitimized their approach in the eyes of officials who controlled land allocation, water rights, and development permissions throughout the region. Now, on a brilliant summer morning 5 years later, Sophia stood on the observation platform atop Community Hall, surveying the valley that had become a model for inclusive frontier development. The original homestead cabin remained at the center, preserved as historical testament to their beginnings, but surrounding it sprawled an integrated community that defied conventional expectations of frontier settlements. Orderly fields demonstrated their innovative agricultural methods, terraced growing beds designed for operation by people with diverse physical capabilities, irrigation systems that minimized labor requirements while maximizing water efficiency, and specialized tools that adapted essential tasks to various physical configurations. The summer harvest was underway, with teams working in coordinated patterns that leveraged each person's strengths while accommodating individual limitations. The community's buildings reflected the same philosophy of adaptive design. Rather than constructing separate facilities for people with specific differences, every structure incorporated universal accessibility features that benefited all residents. Ramps replaced stairs, doorways accommodated various mobility devices, and workspaces adjusted to different heights and reach requirements. What had begun as accommodations for specific conditions had evolved into principles of design that improved functionality for everyone. Most significantly, the community's organization transcended physical adaptation to reimagine how frontier settlements could function socially and economically. Traditional hierarchies based on physical capability had been replaced by collaborative structures that valued diverse contributions equally. Leadership rotated among those with demonstrated expertise in relevant domains, regardless of physical configuration, creating a dynamic governance system that responded effectively to changing conditions. Quite a view, isn't it? Nathan's voice interrupted Sophia's reflections as he joined her on the platform. Their relationship had deepened over the years from professional collaboration to personal partnership, culminating in marriage 3 years earlier. As co-founders of Adaptation Valley, They shared not just a vision, but the daily work of translating ideals into practical reality. "I was just thinking about how far we've come," Sophia replied, leaning slightly against his shoulder in the gesture of affection they had developed. "Not just the physical growth, but the change in thinking that's spreading beyond our boundaries." Nathan nodded, his gaze following hers across the valley to where a group of visitors was receiving orientation. At the Welcome Center, another delegation from back east, third one this month. Word is spreading faster than we can accommodate the interest. The visitors represented the latest manifestation of Adaptation Valley's growing influence: governmental officials, medical professionals, and community planners from eastern states coming to study their methods. What had begun as local curiosity had expanded to national interest as reports of their success reached publications in Chicago, Boston, and New York. Dr. Chamberlain's article in the medical journal seems to have opened floodgates, Sophia observed, referring to a detailed study published 3 months earlier. The prominent physician had spent a month at Adaptation Valley documenting their healthcare approaches, particularly innovations that enabled people with various physical differences to maintain health independently. His findings had challenged fundamental assumptions in medical circles about disability, capability, and quality of life. "It's not just medical interest anymore," Nathan noted. "The architectural delegation last week was more focused on our building designs than on the people using them. They kept saying our accessibility features solved problems they hadn't even recognized in conventional construction." The observation highlighted the community's most significant achievement, demonstrating that inclusive design benefited everyone, not just those with obvious physical differences. Features originally created to accommodate specific conditions had proven valuable for all residents, improving safety, efficiency, and comfort throughout the community. As they descended from the observation platform to begin their day's responsibilities, Sophia and Nathan passed the education center where Jonathan Miller was conducting a demonstration for visiting teachers. The innovative school they had established had become another point of distinction, with teaching methods adapted to diverse learning styles and physical capabilities. The key insight, Miller was explaining to the attentive visitors, is that learning obstacles often exist in teaching methods rather than student capabilities. By providing multiple approaches to essential concepts, we enable each student to engage through their areas of strength while developing complementary skills. The philosophy echoed Adaptation Valley's broader approach, modifying environments and methods rather than expecting individuals to conform to arbitrary standards. The results spoke for themselves, with students from the community consistently demonstrating exceptional problem-solving abilities and practical knowledge application compared to territorial education standards. Sophia's morning responsibilities included meeting with Maria Alvarez, who now directed the community's expanding textile production. What had begun as individual adaptations for Maria's frost-damaged hands had evolved into a thriving enterprise, producing specialized clothing designed for people with various physical configurations. "The order from Chicago exceeded our production capacity," Maria reported, reviewing the workshop's operations. "They want 500 sets of our adaptive winter garments before snow season. We'll need to train additional workers and possibly expand the facility." The economic implications were significant. Adaptation Valley had moved beyond self-sufficiency to become a production center whose specialized goods commanded premium prices in distant markets. Products designed initially for their own residents had found eager customers throughout the country, creating prosperity that fueled further innovation and development. "Work with Fletcher to develop a training program for new producers," Sophia suggested. His experience with mechanical adaptations might help increase efficiency without sacrificing quality. The collaboration exemplified the community's integrated approach to problem solving. Fletcher, whose missing leg had once threatened his livelihood as a guide, now served as Chief Innovation Officer, applying his practical knowledge of wilderness adaptation to manufacturing challenges. The interconnection of diverse expertise created solutions that specialized perspectives might miss individually. Midday brought Sophia to the community's monthly governance meeting, where representatives from various domains gathered to coordinate activities and address emerging challenges. The assembly reflected Adaptation Valley's distinctive character, participants with diverse physical configurations, each contributing specialized knowledge while collectively maintaining the community's core principles. The Housing Committee recommends expanding our northern section with 5 additional family units. Rebecca Williams reported, her arthritic hand steadied by the specialized braces developed in their workshop. Population growth projections indicate we'll need this space by spring, and construction should begin before winter weather arrives. Discussion followed, not about whether to expand but how to implement the growth while preserving their fundamental approach to community design. Questions of resource allocation, construction priorities, and integration with existing systems received thoughtful consideration from multiple perspectives, resulting in a balanced plan that addressed immediate needs while maintaining long-term sustainability. Most striking to outside observers was the matter-of-fact efficiency with which the diverse assembly functioned. Physical differences that might dominate interactions in conventional settings became practically invisible as participants focused on substantive issues rather than accommodation needs. The environment had been so thoroughly adapted that disability in the traditional sense ceased to exist. Each person's unique configuration simply represented one variation among many equally valued forms of human diversity. Afternoon found Sophia in the Agricultural Research Center, where Samuel Chun was coordinating experiments with drought-resistant crop varieties developed specifically for operation with minimal physical labor. The work had attracted funding from the Territorial Agricultural Commission, which recognized its potential application throughout regions facing both water limitations and workforce challenges. The new irrigation system reduces water requirements by 40% while eliminating most heavy lifting, Samuel explained, demonstrating controls designed for operation by people with various physical capabilities. We're documenting everything for the territorial report, but visitors keep asking if we plan to patent the designs. The question of intellectual property had emerged as Adaptation Valley's innovations gained commercial value. While initial developments had been freely shared in the spirit of community benefit, increasing external interest raised complex questions about protecting their approach from exploitation while maximizing positive impact. We should discuss it at next week's Innovation Council, Sophia suggested. There's a balance between maintaining open access for communities that need these solutions and preventing commercial entities from restricting what should remain public knowledge. The dilemma reflected Adaptation Valley's evolving relationship with broader society. What had begun as adaptations for personal survival had become valuable intellectual property with significant economic and social implications. Navigating this transition while maintaining their core values presented ongoing challenges that tested the community's collaborative decision-making processes. Evening brought the most significant event of the day, a reception welcoming Elena Vasquez, the first participant in their newly established Adaptation Fellowship program. Designed to share their methods with other communities, the program selected individuals with physical differences from throughout the territories for intensive training in adaptive design principles, community organization, and specialized skills they could implement in their home regions. Alina, who had lost both legs to a mining accident in Nevada territory, had been chosen from dozens of applicants for her demonstrated leadership abilities and vision for implementing similar approaches in mining communities where industrial injuries created significant populations with acquired disabilities. When I lost my legs, my mining career ended instantly, Alina shared during the welcome ceremony. Not because I couldn't develop methods to continue contributing, but because no one imagined it was possible. Adaptation Valley represents the possibility I was denied, the chance to be valued for what I can do rather than dismissed for what I cannot. The fellowship program represented Adaptation Valley's transition from isolated experiment to catalyst for broader social transformation. By training ambassadors who could implement their principles in diverse contexts, they extended their influence far beyond the physical boundaries of the valley, creating ripple effects throughout frontier development patterns. After the formal welcome, Sophia took Elena on a twilight tour of the community, providing the personal perspective that official orientations often missed. As they moved through the common areas where residents gathered for evening social activities, Sophia pointed out details that revealed the community's evolution from practical necessity to visionary design. We began by solving immediate problems: how I could manage without arms, how Fletcher could contribute without a leg, how Maria could sew with damaged hands, Sophia explained. But we gradually recognized that each solution revealed something larger about human capability and environmental design. The specific adaptations mattered less than the shift in perspective they represented. Elena nodded thoughtfully. In the mining camps, men with injuries are discarded like broken tools. The companies see only what they've lost, never what they might still contribute with different approaches. That's precisely what we're working to change, Sophia confirmed. Not just providing specific adaptations, but transforming the fundamental assumptions about human value and capability that underlies social organization. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Emmett, now serving as Territorial Medical Director, but still maintaining close connections with Adaptation Valley. His monthly visits provided valuable medical oversight while creating an official channel for sharing their healthcare innovations with other settlements. Governor Harrison sends his regards, Dr. Emmett announced as he joined them. And more significantly, confirmation that the territorial legislature has approved funding for regional adaptation centers based on your model. 3 locations initially, with potential for expansion if the approach proves as successful as anticipated. The news represented a milestone in Adaptation Valley's influence on territorial policy. What had begun as unofficial interest was becoming institutionalized in governmental planning, with resources allocated specifically to replicating their methods in other communities. Who will direct these centers? Sophia asked immediately, recognizing both the opportunity and the risk. Implementation without proper understanding could reduce their holistic approach to superficial accommodation, missing the deeper principles that made Adaptation Valley function successfully. That's why I'm here, Dr. Emmett replied. The governor hopes several of your residents might consider relocating temporarily to help establish the initial centers, ensuring they embody your principles rather than merely copying visible features. The request presented a momentous choice. For the community, remaining focused on developing their own settlement would maintain quality control and continued innovation, but might limit broader impact. Dispersing key members to establish satellite centers would extend their influence, but potentially dilute the concentrated expertise that drove ongoing advancement. We'll need to discuss this with the full community, Sophia responded. It's not a decision any individual should make independently. The evening concluded with impromptu music in the central gathering space, a manifestation of Adaptation Valley's cultural evolution beyond practical adaptation to artistic expression. Instruments had been modified for musicians with various physical configurations, creating unique sounds and playing techniques that had developed into a distinctive musical tradition. Visitors often commented that the community's music captured something essential about their approach to life, finding beauty and possibility in unexpected variations rather than conforming to predetermined patterns. As residents and visitors mingled in the gathering space, sharing stories and building connections. Sophia observed the scene with profound satisfaction. The mail-order bride who had arrived with missing arms, seeking basic acceptance from a man she had never met, had instead become the catalyst for a community that was reshaping understanding of human capability throughout the territories. Later that night, reviewing the day's events with Nathan in the privacy of their home, Sophia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point and the choices that would determine their future direction. When I claimed Jackson's homestead, I wanted only to prove I could survive independently, she mused. I never imagined creating something that would influence territorial policy or attract national attention. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. That's the nature of true innovation. It begins with solving immediate problems, but reveals principles with far broader application than the original context. What you developed to manage without arms became the foundation for rethinking how environments could work for everyone. The observation captured something essential about Adaptation Valley's significance. While its specific adaptations for various physical differences were valuable, its most profound contribution was philosophical, demonstrating that human limitations often existed in environmental design and social expectations rather than individual capabilities. Governor Harrison's regional centers present both opportunity and risk, Sophia noted. If implemented thoughtfully, they could transform life options for thousands. But reduced to simplistic accommodation without our underlying philosophy, they could become merely specialized facilities that maintain separation rather than integration. That's why Elena's fellowship program matters so much, Nathan replied. By training people who truly understand our approach, we create ambassadors who can implement the principles rather than just the visible features. The strategy reflected Adaptation Valley's maturing approach to social change, recognizing that transformation occurred not through direct control, but through cultivating understanding that could flourish in diverse contexts. Their most effective influence would come not from expanding their physical community indefinitely, but from disseminating their philosophy through people who embodied its principles. Morning light brought the daily rhythm of community life. Agricultural teams harvesting summer crops, construction crews expanding facilities, researchers documenting innovations, and educators working with children whose diverse learning styles and physical configurations were seen as valuable variations rather than problems to overcome. Watching the community in action from her office window, Sophia considered how completely her understanding of human worth had transformed since losing her arms at 16. What had initially seemed a devastating limitation had become the catalyst for innovations that benefited hundreds directly and potentially thousands as their methods spread throughout the territories. The scheduled arrival of journalists from Harper's Weekly that afternoon represented another expansion of their influence. The prominent publication planned a feature article on Adaptation Valley as a model for frontier development, bringing their philosophy to readers throughout the nation. The opportunity to shape national discourse on disability, capability, and community design represented both responsibility and possibility. We need to ensure they understand this isn't charity or accommodation, Sophia emphasized during the preparation meeting with community representatives who would participate in interviews. It's about recognizing that diverse human configurations create valuable perspectives that strengthen communities when properly integrated. The distinction was crucial. Conventional approaches to disability focused on helping unfortunate individuals approximate normalcy, maintaining fundamental assumptions about human value that relegated physical differences to deficiency requiring compensation. Adaptation Valley's revolutionary insight was recognizing that these differences generated innovative perspectives that benefited everyone when environments and methods were designed with diversity as a foundational premise. We're not helping people with disabilities, Fletcher added, articulating the philosophy he had embraced since losing his leg. We're creating systems that incorporate diverse human variation as a strength rather than a limitation. The disability exists in environments designed with arbitrary physical standards, not in the individuals navigating them. The journalists arrived with the afternoon stage, bringing equipment to document the community visually as well as through written reporting. Their initial questions revealed typical assumptions, focusing on how residents overcame their conditions or compensated for limitations, but exposure to the community's actual functioning gradually shifted their perspective. I expected to find remarkable individuals triumphing despite adversity, the lead journalist admitted after a full day of observation. Instead, I'm seeing a community that has fundamentally reimagined the relationship between human capability and environmental design. This isn't about heroic adaptation to normal standards. It's about questioning whether those standards themselves are necessary or beneficial. The insight represented the transformation Adaptation Valley sought to inspire in all visitors, moving beyond admiration for individual accommodation to recognition that conventional environments unnecessarily excluded valuable contributors through arbitrary physical requirements. When those requirements were removed, capabilities previously invisible could emerge and strengthen collective functioning. As the day concluded with a community gathering welcoming the journalists, Sophia found herself standing beside Elena Vasquez, watching residents and visitors interact with the easy familiarity that characterized Adaptation Valley's social atmosphere. "When I return to the mining region," Elena commented, "this is what I'll find most difficult to recreate. Not the physical adaptations, but this sense that difference is expected and valued rather than merely tolerated." "That's the true foundation," Sophia agreed. "The physical modifications matter, but the cultural perspective makes them work. Without that shift in thinking, adaptive techniques become mere accommodation rather than integration." The observation crystallized Adaptation Valley's most significant legacy, not specific adaptations, but a fundamental reconsideration of human capability that recognized diversity as strength rather than deviation. The mail-order bride who had arrived with missing arms had catalyzed not just a successful community, but a philosophical revolution with implications far beyond physical disability. As twilight painted the valley in deepening gold and purple, residents and visitors gathered on the central green for an evening of storytelling, a tradition that preserved their history while integrating newcomers into their shared narrative. Children settled in anticipation as Sophia took her place in the storyteller's circle, prepared to share the community's origin story for the benefit of both new residents and visiting journalists. 5 years ago, I stepped off a stagecoach in Pinecrest Valley with empty sleeves pinned to my shoulders. She began, her voice carrying clearly in the evening stillness. I had traveled 1,000 miles as a mail-order bride, seeking acceptance from a man I had never met, but who had written that my missing arms didn't define my worth. The familiar beginning captured attention, establishing the context from which Adaptation Valley had emerged. But as Sophia continued the narrative, she emphasized not her individual journey, but the collective wisdom that had developed through collaboration among people with diverse capabilities and perspectives. "What we discovered together was revolutionary," she continued, acknowledging the contributions of each founding member. Not that people with physical differences could approximate conventional functioning, but that those differences generated innovative approaches that improved life for everyone when properly integrated. The subtle distinction reflected Adaptation Valley's mature understanding of its significance, not as a community of exceptional individuals overcoming limitations, but as a living demonstration that human capability expanded when arbitrary physical standards were replaced with environments designed for diverse engagement. "The mountain man who promised I was perfect as I am never met me in person," Sophia concluded, her gaze encompassing the community that had grown from that initial promise. "But his recognition that worth transcends physical configuration became the foundation for everything we've built together." What began as personal acceptance expanded into a philosophy that transforms not just individual lives, but entire communities. As the storytelling circle continued with other residents sharing their experiences, the visiting journalists exchanged meaningful glances, recognizing they had encountered something more profound than the human interest story they had anticipated. Adaptation Valley represented not just practical accommodation, but philosophical revolution, a fundamental reconsideration of human capability with implications for community design throughout the nation. The mail-order bride who had arrived with missing arms had found not just personal acceptance, but the opportunity to demonstrate that physical difference, when approached with creativity rather than resignation, could become the catalyst for innovations that benefited all. In proving herself perfect as she was, Sophia Morgan had helped create a community that recognized every human configuration as potentially valuable, not despite differences, but because of the unique perspectives those differences generated when arbitrary limitations were removed. As stars appeared above the valley that had become a beacon of possibility, the community that had begun with one woman's determination to prove her worth continued building a future where human capability would be measured, not by conformity to physical standards, but by contribution to collective thriving, a legacy that would extend far beyond mountain boundaries to transform understanding throughout the territories and beyond. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.